everyone, it's Joe Waxman, and I am here with Greg Samples from Knoxville, Tennessee. Greg is a macrobiotic teacher and counselor. Now, hi, how are you, Greg?
I'm doing very well, Joe. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too. Good to have you here. So, Greg, where did your macrobiotic adventure begin for you? Tell us your story.
Yeah, that's always the place to start. For me, in 1984, my father died from heart disease, and I could sort of see myself heading in the same direction. Although I did not have any particular health issues at the time, I was maybe 40 pounds overweight, but I'm rather, not short person, so it was sort of distributed evenly, and so I didn't really look overweight. I didn't really have any health issues except for, at the time I didn't think of any as being an issue at all. Looking back on it, I could see, having colds or flu, 3 or 4 times a year was an indication that the immune system was not functioning really well. But at the time, I didn't think of any real issues. I just knew that long term, I needed to do something differently. So that I didn't end up like my father did. And so I began looking around, and then quite serendipitously, I was traveling in Tennessee at the time. Acupuncture was illegal, 1985. This was 1985. Wow. Yeah, come a long way since then. Doctors could do it, but they never did because, they weren't trained in it. So my wife at the time, Michelle, had some issues that she wanted to work on with acupuncture. So we went over to Asheville, North Carolina, for her to get an acupuncture treatment. And while we were there, I saw a copy of the Cancer Prevention Diet lying on the coffee table while I was in the waiting room. And so I read a couple of chapters in that, and it just made sense to me. And then about 6 months later, we were in Boston studying with the Macrobiotic Learning Center, a gentleman named Lauren Spector. I don't know if you know Lauren or not, but he was teaching in Boston at the time. You go up there for a week, spend a week in his house, become sort of immersed in macrobiotic theory and principles, and cooking classes 2 or 3 times a day. And that was a great experience. Then we came back and started practicing. And for me, it was, the health issues became apparent because I started losing weight without even trying. Got down to my weight that I weighed when I graduated from high school. The immune system problems cleared up. All those things just sort of went away. And, everything was going along smoothly. And then a person from a local health food store knew that this is what we were doing. And so she asked us to teach a class there, cooking class and a lecture. And my first reaction was, well, I don't feel qualified to do that. And she said, well, you know more than anybody else in this town, so just say what you know. So we did. And that, surprisingly to me, turned out to be a rousing success. And turned out I could answer all the questions that were asked because you didn't have to know the answers. You just had to know the principles. Mm. So, but it just kind of started from there. And then we started inviting teachers in. Ended up going to the Cushey Institute in 1988, studied there in Boston. But the best thing, I guess, that was great, but the best thing was inviting other teachers down to Knoxville to teach there and to have our students come and listen to them. Lino Stankic, Bob Carr, Bill Spear. We actually had a camp for a retreat a couple of times a year that people would come to. Ed Esco came, Diana Voley, Luci Baranda. And all of these times when people would come in, I would sit in on consultations and listen in. So it was kind of an apprenticeship, but it was better than a normal apprenticeship because you weren't just studying with one person, you were studying with multiple persons. You were getting, insights from all different aspects and so forth. And so then after that, I began counseling myself, and we began going around all the Southeast, different towns, Nashville, Memphis, Little Rock, Birmingham, Atlanta, many cities in Florida. North Carolina and South Carolina. And so, that's when I really began to learn, because I was learning more from my clients than I was from the teachers that I had even before. So it was a great adventure, and still going strong 33 years later.
Nice. So, wow, that was a pretty quick summary. Well, so I mean, what else in this time span can you talk about? Like what happened, I don't know, through the years that is worth mentioning?
Well, I think the disappointing thing with macrobiotics is that it's become, for me, it wasn't so much about the health, because I didn't have any health problems to start with. So I was able to get into the philosophy of it, which was what was really attractive to me, a little more quickly than most people, I think. But in the 90s, things were very strong. We had, people pounding at our door, coming in. People, my wife was such a good cook that we had people wanting us to adopt them, adults wanting us to adopt them so that they could come and eat our cooking and that kind of thing. But it's the people that were studying the philosophy then have sort of moved on to other things, and there's not a great interest in the philosophy now as much as there was back in the 80s and 90s, which I think is disappointing, because when people they're just looking for the health aspects of it, then they have other options that they want to go to. And some of those other options can be effective. I don't think as effective as macrobiotics, but they can be effective, and with a lot less discipline required, a lot less self-control. And, sort of, if you can take a vitamin pill or a supplement and just go vegetarian, then it doesn't affect your life as much. But you don't get the gist of it. You don't get the depth of the possibilities of macrobiotics that way. So I think it's lost some of its effectiveness because of that. I think in part that's because we don't have those great leaders like we had before, like Michio Kushi and Herman Ahira and Muramoto. Those are sort of the pillars of the movement, and it's more dispersed now, more diverse. We don't have that one or two or three people to look to for a guidepost, so to speak. And so it's not as focused as it used to be, but of course the principles are still there, and they're eternal and ever changing. So if people can just find those, then it'll work just as well for them as ever. Yeah. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just curious. Like, I mean, I get your point about Michio and the Kushis, the Iharas, and those people being gone, but doesn't that give us an opportunity, us being all the people in the macrobiotic community that want to be involved in it, doesn't it create an opportunity for us to step up and fill bigger roles, because we don't have, you know what I mean? Like we have to show up, we have to step up, we have to be the leaders. I mean, we in the big sense.
And I think people have done that. I just think that the fact that there's not this one or two people that are sort of the top of the pyramid, there's just more diverse ways to look at it. So you don't have that solitary or sole sort of, not authority, but guidepost to look to. It's like you can still navigate without having the North Star, but it's really better if you do have the North Star. Again, to me, use an analogy. So So it's I mean, this is inevitable. It's bound to happen. But because none of us are immortal. But it just makes things more difficult. But then that makes things better as well. So it all works out.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So how are things now for you, teaching and counseling? What's that like?
Well, I don't do near as much as I used to, just because I think there's several factors involved there. One, my own personal situations have changed, but also, as I mentioned earlier, people are having more options out there. They don't, there's, when in the 80s and 90s, macrobiotics was sort of the only alternative game in town. Now there's a lot of other ones out there that to compete with. But the people who do follow it and do use it are still get just as much benefit as ever and are very successful with it if they do follow it.
For you personally, what do you think has been your biggest growth area? The thing that you notice most? What do you love most about your macrobiotics? That it's done for you experientially.
Well, there's so many. That's a good question. I don't know how I would classify that as which has done the most, but I think the best thing is to be able to find answers to whatever questions you may have, whether it be about your health or your relationships or your personality, all those things. You have a realization that you have these, as Osawa would call it, magic spectacles. Mm-hmm. And you can find answers to those things inwardly, but you don't have to go seek them out somewhere else. I'm still here. I hear people talking all the time, like, well, I need to move to another town or something like that so that I can develop and move on with my life. And that really never works because you might get a different experience, but the problem is within you, and you have to go inside and find that issue within inside yourself, and it doesn't really matter where you are when you do that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the biggest thing, and of course that's what macrobiotics is about: becoming independent, becoming self-determining, and controlling your life. And when you know that you can go inward and find the answers to whatever issue you might have, it makes things much more palatable and much more, I guess the word is easier to find or just not as frustrating because you know what you can do. Just to give you an example, back in 2012, I had an issue with the gallbladder myself. I had a stone that was a gallstone that was blocking one of the ducts, and so I did get a ultrasound that suggested that was what it was, or told me what it was, and they said, well, we just need to go in and remove your gallbladder. I said, I don't think that would be something I want to do, and so I just used 5-element theory. I came home, spent 3 days of eating unsalted rice cakes and tangelos to open up the duct for the liver, using sour, 5-element theory and sour tasting things and yin sour. And it opened up and it passed. And that was 8 years later. I haven't had another issue with it. So, being able to do something like that is just so freeing and so liberating that, you just want to be able to share that information with the whole world. Mm-hmm. But not everybody's ready to listen yet.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. What the thought that came up when you were talking about that, when you're saying go inward, I wasn't sure if you were talking about, the yin yang dialectic, which obviously 5 elements is related to that. It's an extension of that. But there's also, being sensitive, where I was also thinking like you can go in and rely on, for me at least, I know that if I eat something, I can have a sense about what it's doing to me just based on my awareness and sensitivity and doing this for long enough. So there's that aspect too, looking inward to your own experience, which I think is heightened with macrobiotics. You become more sensitive to food.
Right. Yeah. We all have intuition at all times. But the question is that intuition correct? And so, the cleaner your channel is, the more direct information you're getting from the infinite, then of course, the more accurate a picture you're going to get, just like a TV, with getting a clear channel from the signal. Mm-hmm. So, the more we clean out the the better our intuition is, and the better we can deal with things. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you on that. So, Greg, what else? What's big in your life these days? What do you got going on that's really worth talking about?
Well, of course, with this coronavirus thing, that's a big issue with everybody these days. We'll be doing a class with Virginia Harper in Nashville on how to protect yourself from any kind of virus, but we'll specify, we'll focus on COVID-19. But of course, natural immunity is something that the world doesn't really understand these days. Most people, you just, you go out and again, give me a pill, give me a treatment for this, and they don't realize that, how to build their own immune system. And if they could do that, they wouldn't have to worry about those things. So we'll be doing a class on that. I've written a couple of books. One is called the Health Freedom Manual. I wrote that in the late 90s. It's on my website, gregsamples.com, which sort of spells out my application, my interpretation of how disease occurs and what to do about it in each specific situation. And then I also, back in the mid-90s, I became very political. I was always been very political, but I became more political in that sense, and I've run for office about 6 times with libertarian principles. I see the two, macrobiotics is sort of the, and libertarianism have the same onus, I guess you would say, because they're both about individual responsibility and freedom, liberation. Macrobiotics on a personal sense, libertarianism on a social sense, but they both harken back to Lao Tzu and icons like that. So that's been a big part of my life as well. That's even more difficult to change than individuals because there's not a lot of motivation to change that as much, but it's still, it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun, and just so interesting to see how things change.
So I mean that's an interesting point, Greg, because I tend to agree with you, and I know that we've had some similarities in our viewpoints about that. But politics is such a touchy subject. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I totally agree with you, but that there seems to be some like this huge disparity, even within macrobiotics, between understanding that health is our responsibility, but then when it comes to politics, it's like there's this huge disconnect where everyone's like, well, in politics, nothing's our responsibility. We need government to take care of everything. It's like, Jesus, like what do you what do you think when like macrobiotic people are like, yeah, I take care of my health, but I want government to take care of everything else, or something like that? It's like, okay, what's going on there?
Well, did you ever see the movie South Pacific?
No.
Okay, well, it's a great movie, and it's a musical, and there's a song in there toward the end. It's about racism, and it says, "You have to be carefully taught." That's the name of the song. And these things we learn at a very early age. Our religion, our politics, and even our health. There's a pattern that people see, and different diseases tend to run in families, right? And most people think this is a genetic thing, and there's some aspect of that, but it's also because different families eat the same foods generally, and so we learn at a very early age to eat certain foods, and only when we have a motivation, for most people, only when we have a motivation to change because of some health issue, that we divest ourselves of those foods that we learned to eat as a young person. Well, the same is true with our thoughts, with politics or religion. Until we have a motivation to change those thoughts that have been ingrained in us at a very early age, and the bias that we create with that, then we don't have a reason to change them.
Hmm.
And I think that's why it's so hard to change those things, because uh, even when you change your own health and you change your perspective on life, those early indoctrinations, I should say, is what they are, about the way things should be politically, are still in your mind. Now, I had always thought that with macrobiotics, we could change that by changing what we eat, and what we change. When we change what we eat, we change our physical health, but we also change our mental health, which is true. We change our emotional health, which is true also. But I think our political um, viewpoints are like the bones in our body. They just don't change very fast. You know, they take a long time to heal and change. And you know, at first I was very frustrated about that, but I've learned to accept it and just keep putting it out there, and eventually maybe things will change. And we're also in this cycle, as if you go back to macrobiotic theory, you know, we're in this cycle of universal or cosmological era where things are speeding up. Things are becoming more expanded, more speeding up, and faster lifestyle, and less attention to, you know, the simple things in life. And so that becomes a stumbling block as well. So that, you know, we can't even focus on a principle because the news changes every day, and we're always focused on what the news of the day is rather than what the principle behind it is. And so I think that's also just a sign of the times, or a concept of the times, that until this, you know, cycle passes, when we start to slow down again, things are just going to continue to get more and more chaotic. And it's just like surfing on a wave. You know, we just have to understand that that's the way it is. Eventually the wave will die down when it hits the shore, but until it does that, we just have to try to, you know, stay on our feet.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, I've run into that a lot, and as you know, that I could be very stubborn about my viewpoints, but it didn't seem to help. Like, everyone's stubborn. Everyone wants to hold on to their viewpoints. Nobody wants to change their mind.
Right.
And for me, I decided, like, it just wasn't bearing any fruit. It wasn't getting me anywhere, saying this is the way it is and you better change your mind to suit my mind. And, you know, it's much better for me to sort of put our differences aside and try and bring people together, which is what I'm doing here, instead of, you know, trying to get everyone to think like I do. But, you know, at the same time, it's an interesting topic, which is why I bring it up with you. And, like, Lao Tzu was very anti-government, I guess you could say. He didn't. I
Right.
mean, he didn't write tons about it, but what he did write was very telling, and that's I love that. Um, and then bring it back to macrobiotics. Michio talked about one world government, one world, and one peaceful world, and then he extended it to one world government. And I think this is a confusing point for a lot of people when it comes to politics, because they see the globalists and they're like, well, that's what Michio wanted. You know, he wanted one world government. But there's two different. There could be a good one world government, like that promotes health, and I say good in a one that promotes health and individuality and gives the individual the power and protects the individual and protects, you know, abuse of power. And then there could be the exact opposite of that, a total tyrannical, you know, fascist, statist, um, you know, stronghold that imprisons everyone. You know, one prison planet. You know, could be the
Exactly.
other extreme of that. So I think people are confused about that.
Well, you know, in the book One Peaceful World, Michio does talk about world government. But if you read closely what he said, you know, it's actually, he actually even talks about, it's not really the type of government that we normally think of as government. It's more about just sort of an advisory council.
Right.
And it's really more like anarchy, anarchy rather than a government. It's more like just no government. Um,
Right.
so, you know, this is, you know, what John Lennon used to sing about and so forth. But, you know, we have to remember that we're in a very tiny aspect of human evolution and world history. And nothing ever goes forward in a straight line. It's always in a spiralic mean. So we're going to take 2 steps forward and 1 back. And, you know, and these can be on small or large scales. And so, but if you look at the large, you know, time frames, you see human history moving toward human liberation. And when we take steps backward, that gets really frustrating, and it seems like, you know, we're just going the wrong direction. But in reality, we're just taking one of those steps backward so that we can take another step forward or 2 steps forward again. Because, you know, if you look at the long, big picture, we're definitely improving human life. We're definitely improving human consciousness. But, you know, it's a big, long process. It's not going to happen tomorrow. And so what we have to do is just, you know, keep putting it out there, keep telling people, you know, what the principles are, what the principles can be. Keep telling people that, you know, brown rice and millet are good foods. You know, just that's a perfect example right there. You know, you know, brown rice and millet and whole cereal grains became sort of the centerpiece of macrobiotics, and now there's this you know, backwash against that, where, you know, you talk about the keto diet and things like that, where people are saying, you know, we shouldn't be eating any grains because they have sugar in them. Well, this is, you know, a total misconception. And they don't understand the difference between complex and simple carbohydrates and those types of things. But you just have to deal with that and, you know, slowly explain to them, and, you know, just eventually they'll figure it out. But in the meantime, you know, they may suffer liver disease or colon disease, and then they'll figure it out. But you know, we just have to keep putting it out there until people finally get it.
Right. Yeah, one of the biggest idiot kind of ideologies coming up in the modern nutrition world is that fat doesn't make you fat. Carbohydrates make you fat. Like, are you insane? Like, how retarded do you have to be to believe that? Like, do you have a brain at all? Like, fat literally is fat. I mean, it needs no, you know, your body doesn't need to do anything to it to turn it into fat. Just, it's fat.
Right.
You know, fat becomes fat on you. Like, it's a direct relationship. Whereas carbohydrate only turns to fat when you eat too much of it and your body can't store it as energy. And then and then some of it is burned up in the process of turning it into fat. So still, you know, only like, I don't know, 75-80% of that excess carbohydrate turns into fat. And that's only if you're, you know, not eating, like if you're eating like white flour, too much white flour or sugar itself, you know.
Right.
So.
Yeah, you know, there's so much misinformation out there and so much disinformation that it's almost, you know, we can't swim because we're too busy treading water. You know, we just have to keep realizing that, you know, these things are going to happen, and it's a big world out there, and just stick to our principles and keep moving forward.
Right. So, Greg, what else is interesting to talk about for you right now?
Well, you know, this the whole pandemic thing, I think, has got an interesting aspect to it, in that you know, it's so damaging on so many levels. The whole shutdown and things. I think, you know, you have certain people that are making these decisions for the whole world, basically, or for the whole country. Or at least, you know, whether it's local, state, or national, or for the whole world. And the people who are making those decisions are only looking at one aspect of life. They're only looking at one thing, and how can we stop this one thing? And they don't even have, you know, if you want to get into germ theory versus terrain theory and those types of things. They don't even think about in those terms. They just think about, how can we stop this one thing? And they lose sight of, all the other aspects that, their decisions are having. Like, for example, when you tell people to stay home and not to go anywhere, then, and you can't do your job, you can't go to a concert, you can't go to a sporting event, you can't go out to dinner with your friends, then, the next thing you know, you have, domestic abuse is going up, alcoholism is going up, depression is going up, suicide is going up. So, we have to get people somehow to start looking at things in a more holistic, big picture way, rather than just focusing on what they're doing and what their job is and how it's going to affect everybody else and what everything else is in the world is happening. And I didn't even mention the fact, the loss of income and loss of, support that people are having. People, they had to pass laws that, you couldn't evict people because they couldn't pay their mortgage and their rents and these types of things. It's just, they don't look at the, and at the big picture, the effect of things, and they made those judgments based on projections, not on actual facts. So it's most crises in human nature, whether it be war or pandemics or things like that, are actually caused by human decision making. I often say to people, when they ask me, what do you think about all these negative effects that the pandemic has caused? And I go, well, the pandemic didn't cause that. It's the reaction to the pandemic that caused all those things. So, it's an interesting concept, and people, that are in power, that they have wielding more power than they should have, are making decisions that affect people's lives. They don't have the judgment and the whole overview to see everything like we would, if you had studied something like macrobiotics or even some other, mechanism or modalities that would give them a more holistic view of things. But somehow those people got in power, and it's affecting the whole world.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of viewpoints about that I'm kind of reluctant to share because I think it would alienate a lot of people. But I think there's huge abuse of power. I do not trust them for 1 second. I think there's like 100% like ulterior motives. I don't think they're telling the truth at all about what they're really going after, the real agenda. But I think they're trying to control people. They want to control people. They want to subdue people. They're not out for people's health. If they were, they wouldn't be promoting, drugs and pills and meat and dairy. They would look at the real science, and they don't care about people. They don't care about our health. They want to say, I saw a sign that said on Facebook, it was like an official sign. It said, food cannot help your immunity. Do not focus on diet. Do not think diet's going to help. Just wear a mask, go to your doctor, do all that, It's like, are you kidding me? You expect me to believe all this nonsense? Like, they don't care. They know the truth. They're not that stupid. Okay. They know that, food can help people. The science is already there. We've caught up to it, but they're really, they're, they are evil. There are evil people pulling these, calling the shots. In my view.
Yeah, well, and the scary part is the worst could be yet to come if you get something like mandatory vaccinations, which if you just look at the history of vaccination and the disorders and certain types of disorders that rise along with the vaccination rates and so forth, that could be an absolute disaster. But going back to your point about, I understand that doctors are sort of, tied down by regulations about what they can do and what they can't do. And I understand that. But I had a conversation with one many years ago about diet and macrobiotics, and they were talking about what I did, and they agreed with me. They said, yes, what you're teaching people is correct. That's the way that this can create health. And I go, well, why don't you share this with your patients? And he said, well, it's, they wouldn't do it. If I share this with them, they wouldn't do it. Well, I'm going, well, if you tell them and they don't do it, then that's on them.
Yeah.
But if you don't tell them, that's on you.
Yeah, that's a cheap excuse. But, yeah.
At least give them the option. At least give them the ability. So it kind of goes back to karma and these types of things. But I don't know what is going to happen with this in the long term. But I do know that we're in very dangerous times right now. When you start talking about mandatory vaccinations, and not just vaccinations for ones that have been in use for a long time, vaccinations that are brand new and nobody's really even tested them thoroughly.
Right.
Nobody knows the long-term effect on them.
They change your DNA, right? RNA,
yeah,
DNA, yeah.
The latest one, that's what they're talking about doing.
Huh.
Which is what the coronavirus does, because it goes in and, the RNA and the virus goes into your cells and uses your DNA to reproduce itself. But
that's so scary.
Yeah, it's Aldous Huxley's Brave New World is really bearing down on us.
I read that. And what's scary to me, and I don't want to get like too caught up in the, my political views, but I feel like, okay, if Biden wins, I feel like he's going to force vaccinations on us. I'm just going to say it. And I already know Trump's not, because he hasn't, and he says he's not going to. And I feel like Biden will, and that's freaking scary. And I'm just like, if that happens, I'm going to go ballistic, because I do not want that, and may end up in jail, but I do not want that in any way, shape, or form. Like it's like death. It's like you might as well just give people a death sentence, because you're taking away their sovereign ability to decide their own health and destiny. This alters your DNA, and they can put these little chips in there, and they can, then you're like on the system, and you're computerized, and you're tracked and monitored. And I don't want any of that. I'm stubborn. I don't care. I will cut my arm off to get it out of me. I don't care. Like, that's a huge, huge, huge thing. Like, hell no.
Yeah, well, someone asked the question once about, said, of all the things that government has done up to now, why have you chosen the masks situation to draw the line? A lot of people out there there's a movement out there that, it's like, we're not going to wear the mask. Well, that's such a small thing, people say. Why is that? Well, because the next step is the vaccination. You don't want to get to that next step. And fortunately, there's a lot of people out there, mostly mothers with young children, who are ready to take a stand about it. And that vaccination is with their children is the point where they would absolutely do not, do anything they could to resist that. This is the bridge too far that they will be pushed. So it's going to be very interesting to see how and these are not just macrobiotic people, people of all walks of life that have seen injuries to other people's children with vaccines, and they don't want that to happen to their own. So, there's a huge resistance out there. I hate to use the term silent majority, because it's not a majority by any means, but they've been silent for a long time. But their government is just about to reach the point with the vaccines that they're going to meet resistance like they've never met before. Which, it's very fortunate, and it's encouraging to know that that's out there. But I've seen it.
It's so scary, because I know Biden has already made the claim that he wants everyone to wear a mask. He's going to make a mandate, that all Americans must wear a mask for 3 months, which we know 3 months means indefinitely. Just wear a mask forever, basically.
Yeah.
And that is a huge encroachment on our freedoms, and it tells me where he stands with his medical tyranny. He's pro-medical tyranny. I do not trust him for 1 second. And that's so important to me. I mean, there's nothing more important to me than my ability to govern my own life, and my son. I worry about him too. So, man, I mean, this is such a huge turning point, huge time period for America, for the world. I mean, where is it going to go? What's going to happen? We don't know. We're going to find out.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting concept. But I know there's a point out there that people will resist, with all the energy they have in their body.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that point is at vaccination, but we shall see. Maybe not.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, I've seen a lot of resistance online to it. And some people are like, coming from the fear side. Well, if it protects my mom or my grandma or whatever, I'm like, you can't trade your freedom because you're afraid the old people in your life are going to die. Old people die. I hate to break it to you. That's what
Right.
they do, And if they can't, I'm not saying, I'm not cold-hearted. I don't want anyone to die prematurely, but I mean, you got to think about the ramifications, the long term. You can't give up our medical freedom so that your granny might live another few years.
Well, it wouldn't help them anyway. The issue is that I was just reading the other day. Every day of our lives, we are exposed to about 340 trillion viruses on our body, around our bodies. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that we can somehow, prevent that from happening by wearing a piece of cloth over our nose and mouth. A virus in size is 0.02 microns. The pores of your skin are 250 to 500 microns. So, but of course the pores of your skin has salt in them so that the viruses can't live in there. But take that concept to another level. How do we protect our mucous membranes from viruses? And it's the same way that we've been doing it for millennium. We have certain aspects of our immune system that defeats viruses, but it also has to do with just our own stable defense with the mucus that's produced there. So the idea that a vaccine or a mask or staying 6 feet apart from each other is going to protect human beings from any kind of virus, doesn't matter what it is ludicrous. Mm-hmm. Eventually, unless you live in a plastic bubble for the rest of your life, you're going to come in contact with the coronavirus. There's no question about it. If you've taken a vaccine for that and it hasn't harmed you in some other way, you may survive that. But unless you build your immune system and do something else, that unfortunately, the same things that help us build our immune system are the same things that protect us against heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and arthritis, and lupus, and all those other degenerative diseases. Right. So, it's ludicrous to think that we could, take a vaccine or put a piece of plastic over our face to protect us.
It's ludicrous.
Yeah.
I mean, and the other thing is that if people think that the coronavirus is it and the rest of your life is going to be scot-free, think again, because even if you think that this virus is not man-made, I don't know. I tend to think it is, but there's going to be other ones, and there's going to be new ones, and there's going to be more, and they're going to be more dangerous, and something's going to get you eventually if you're not taking care of your health. Greg, are you at all concerned about coronavirus for you?
No,
No, me
no.
either. My parents are not worried about it either. They're in their 70s. My mom
Yeah,
never.
I'm 70 years old myself.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, but no, it never concerned me at all.
Yeah.
Not for a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Insanity. I mean, they can engineer viruses, and I know there are a lot of eugenicists who are rich and powerful. The world is growing, the population's growing, and a lot of their viewpoints, if you actually listen to what they're saying, they want to reduce the population. A lot of these rich and powerful people, what do you think they're
Right.
doing with all their money? You think they're not thinking about create, even if they haven't created this, you think they're not thinking about it? They are thinking about
There
it.
is
That's what they do.
there is a Malthusian entity out there with a lot of people that are in power that they truly believe that the world is overpopulated, that there's too many people in the world. I actually heard Zeke Emanuel, who is Rahm Emanuel's brother. Rahm Emanuel was the mayor of Chicago. He was Clinton's chief of staff or something like that, and he's a medical doctor. And he actually got on one of the TV news shows and said, you know, if you're 75 years old, you shouldn't really need to live anymore. You know, you've had your life. Go on. Let the rest of it. Let the younger people have the world. This is the kind of thinking that's out there. You know, and you know, if the population keeps growing and growing and growing, then the world will not be able to sustain it, and we're all going to, just live in misery, and it's going to be a disaster. Well, nature has a way of taking care of that. You know, we don't have to go out and worry about how many deer are in the woods. The deer population regulates itself according to the natural flow of things. Human beings are no different. You know, the human population will regulate itself. We don't have to worry about that. We certainly don't have to kill people at age 75 just to, you know, make the population go down. But, you know, I guess the person who said that, you know, after age 75, we had no other reason to live, never read Chinese text that said, you know, the first 60 years of our life were for physical development, and the last 60 years of our life were for our spiritual development. We should actually live to 120. You know, I guess that thought never occurred to him. So he's going to, basically what he's going to do is going to be killing somebody at age 15 spiritually. You know, this is the kind of thinking that we just have to recognize that's out there and try to modulate it as much as possible.
Greg, not only that, I mean, the pre-World War II Germany, they were experimenting with eugenics a lot, and they had this attitude that was common, and that opened the door to the final solution, because they were already killing people. They were killing sick people. They were killing old people. They were just euthanizing anyone who they thought wasn't a good productive member of society. And then Hitler came in and said, well, throw the Jews in with that category, and the gypsies and whoever else, you know. It's and I hate to say it, but we're already experiencing it here in America. Why do you think these governors are putting coronaviruses in the old age homes? They're eugenicists. I mean, what you don't? That's
not new in America.
All right,
you know, eugenics started in America back in the early 1900s, and it's sort of died out for a while. But it's, you know, it's like you said, it's coming back. But yeah, there's been experiments. I mean, in the United States with eugenics in mind, how to control populations, how to reduce populations, how to change populations, all those types of things, because they have in their mind that they are, you know, arrogantly think that they are superior to everyone, and they're the ones who should be making decisions on how you live your life and whether you live your life or not. It's, you know, unfortunately, there's very few people who are aware of this, and most of the population out there is only concerned about, you know, what's on their plate that day, you know, what's on the news that morning or that afternoon, you know, and of course we've been distracted for years by sports and entertainment, and now that's been taken away. So now you're just focusing on these silly things every day that are happening in political, what this person said or what that person said, which really doesn't make any difference what they said. It's what they do that makes the difference. All we can do at this point, I think, is just, focus on making ourselves as centered and balanced and conscious as possible, and share that wherever we can, whenever we can. Yeah, we don't have a forum necessarily like like NBC or something to get it out, but we can still get it out with our neighbors and our friends, and actually shake hands with somebody.
Exactly. We do what we can, and that's what we're both doing here now, actually. So, Greg, let's reel it in a bit. We went off on our little bit of a parallel there, which is okay, perfectly fine. But what do you think? What's your message to the macrobiotic community? Like, what if you could put into words something that you think the macrobiotic community either needs to hear or needs to do or needs to change or something like that?
Well, I will back up just a bit and say that Joe Jorgensen, who is the third-party candidate for president, actually came to some of my macrobiotic classes in the 90s. So if you want to vote for a macrobiotic person for president, that would be Joe Jorgensen. But beyond that, we just have to refocus on the things that we were taught from the very beginning of macrobiotics. Yin and yang, 5-element theory, 7 original principles, 12 laws of change. Those things, 5-element theory, all those things, they never change. They never go out of style. So if we can keep focusing on that, and not just for health or food, but in all aspects of our life, that's where we have to get to. But also, just make sure that what you think and what you feel is being self-reflected on, so that you're not just assuming something is correct because that's the way you've always thought of it being. People talk to me and have said to me, well, you seem to be very rigid in your beliefs. Well, I said, well, that's interesting to say, because in my lifetime, I've changed my religion, my politics, my lifestyle, all those things, I've changed because I chose to, because I examined things and looked at them in a different way. So, it's one thing to, try to convince other people about different things, where, what we should eat, what we should be thinking and so forth, or who we should support. But that, of course, always has to start with our own self-reflection. And that would be my message. Just, don't ever stop self-reflecting on what you're doing and how you're thinking and how you view the world and the people around you.
That's a great message, self-reflection. I fully believe in that, and that's one of the things that helped me tremendously. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. It's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're getting close to that time. So, guys, as always, check out my website, themacrobioticdiet.com. You can book an appointment with me there, read my blog posts, which I'm a little behind on. I've been doing more videos these days than writing blogs, but they're still there. Greg, what final words or plugs do you have for us?
You can get my book on gregsamples.com. The coronavirus seminar that we're going to have, you can find out about Virginia's website, which is youcanhealyou.com, and we do have a digital method of attending. If you want to do that, that would be great. I think we have a lot of information to share there, and keep learning. Your whole life, never stop.
Well, thank you, Greg. This was fascinating for me. I hope other people enjoyed it as much as I do. I don't often get a chance to talk about these things with somebody like-minded, but I enjoyed it. So appreciate it, Greg. Thank you.
Same here, Joe. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too. All right.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.